Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of A Manic Odyssey. I am back with Dr. Cindy Nguyen, and she is the coolest for taking the time today to give us some insight on DBT. We continue on our journey to better understand DBT practices, and in this case, what the DBT Center of Orange County is doing. So I've already interviewed a couple of your amazing team members,
Mhm.
and so I'm going
Yes.
to ask you a lot of the same questions. Just first off, who are you? How did you get here? How did you get into DBT? And yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to have this discussion with you. But yes, hi, I'm Dr. Cindy Nguyen. I'm a postdoc at DBTO Center. I love DBT. So you asked me what are the reasons why I got into DBT?
Mhm.
It's a lot of different reasons. I think that I love DBT because it's so practical and there's so many useful skills that I think that a lot of the other evidence-based treatments lack.
Mm.
And I think that it's really relatable to not only those with like borderline personality disorder, but with those with emotional dysregulation or with other individuals with other presenting problems. So I think it's just the best. I might be biased, but I think it's the best.
I I'm a little biased myself, so I
Uh-huh.
would agree with you. I think that what makes it so great is that it's both like what you said, it's so practical.
Mhm.
That's a theme that keeps coming up in these conversations. Is like it's very high-minded because the things we're doing require a deep connection to ourself, and it's like it's easy. I was saying recently that I wish I could just give people the tip skills, like just give them a card that has the tip skills.
Yeah.
Right? Like just
Yeah.
those little helpers right there could really make a difference in
Mhm.
people's life. Well, when you were in undergrad, were you like, hey, I want to go in the DBT route, or were you like, when did
No.
you make that decision?
Yeah, really good question. So I had no idea what the heck DBT was until I think when I was in my last year of my doctorate program. So it was like when I was doing my internship.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I feel like DBT really is like this specialty and this niche that I wish a lot of our doctorate programs put more emphasis on. I think that a lot of our programs talk about CBT, so cognitive
Mhm.
behavioral therapy systems and like family dynamics, and DBT really is that niche. And so when I came across it in my last practicum site or during my internship, I was like, dude, this is where it's at. This is what
Yeah.
I've been waiting for. It just really was my calling to be working with this population and also teaching individuals and clients these skills. Because again, it's so useful. I love the fact that it's acronyms. You know what I mean? So it's easy to remember because when we're in that heightened distress, it's really hard to recall useful strategies. And DBT really does create a useful way to memorize
Yes. Yeah.
effective skills
Yes.
in a fun way.
Yes. I'm as soon as you said that, I was like, dear man, please, right? Like these are
Yeah,
so
yeah.
easy to bring to top of mind, and they're
Or
so
literally
practical.
stop. Yeah,
Yes.
literally stop.
Well, and what's so wild is like I've had therapies in the past where a therapist has used
Mhm.
some of these skills, never in the context of DBT, but
Right.
certain skills that I remember them being like, oh, this will be useful. The problem is it was not as useful to me because it wasn't in the context of the overall what I needed. It was more
Yeah,
it was a solution. It just wasn't the solution to all of the
yeah,
issue. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
It wasn't applicable.
Yes, whereas I feel like
Yeah.
DBT does a really good job of getting, as a team, getting to the root of the issue, and then when the client, when we're ready, taking us onto that next step and that next journey. That's so cool.
Yeah.
That is wild to me that it wasn't until the
Right.
very end of your
Right.
postdoctoral degree that you stumbled into
Yeah.
this niche. Why is it
Yeah.
that it is not? I mean, it's been around since the mid '80s. Why is it that it's not
Yeah.
coming more into
Yeah.
these programs?
Honestly, that I think I ask myself that literally every single day, and I think that a lot of the populations, whether that be the hospital settings, school settings, community mental health, which I did majority of my training, they
Mhm.
would really benefit from DBT. And I think that there's a lot of barriers, whether that be like finances, like political stuff, like who knows. But
Yeah.
I think again, DBT could really be really useful in a plethora of different settings. And I did a lot of trauma treatment. So I was well versed in CBT, trauma work, and substance use. And again, when
Yeah.
I came across DBT, it really just kind of it really combined all of the things I loved about my previous training and just like amplified it, made it a lot better and useful and practical and just amazing.
Yes, I feel like, and maybe this is an overreach, but I'll do my best
Mhm.
to keep it grounded. It feels like a lot of the other therapy modalities, which I'm interested to interview them as time goes on. I have a psychodynamic therapist who I'm excited to interview at some point. I feel like a lot of the other modalities are more like a musical. number, and it's well choreographed, and everybody knows their part. And if you do well, it's a great show, and if you don't do well, maybe you try again next week and get another good show. Whereas DBT
Right.
kind of feels more like improv and jazz, where you're
Mhm,
going with
mhm,
the, yes, there is structure, but
mhm.
it's more of a principled structure versus
Yep,
a like systemic structure.
100%.
Is that true to your experience?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely true to my experience. I think that I love that metaphor. It really is, you're creating a melody and you're creating like a symphony with your client. And it's like, how can you conduct a masterpiece if they're not doing it collaboratively and
Yes.
making this like a beautiful melody? And so I love that metaphor. And it has been my experience. Yeah, and that's my style too. I think like the clients definitely know them best. And I tend to work in a collaborative state versus me pointing at them saying, you need to do this, or
Yeah.
I'm the main conductor, right? It's not going to
Yeah.
work like that.
Yeah.
No.
And it sounds like, from what I've heard recently from your team members, is that one of the best practices that DBT brings to the table is the um, there is an actual word for it, but the team meeting.
Oh, oh, team consult.
Thank you, team consult.
Yeah.
I've heard it.
Yeah.
I should know it by this point. Team
No,
consult.
shitting
Oh,
judgment,
you're
shit.
right. Oh my gosh, you caught me. That was my that was my
We all
favorite
do that.
part.
We all do that. I shit on myself all the time. So we all do that.
That was my favorite part of group therapy.
Yeah.
Was I had two leaders who were very prone to do it in a non-judgmental way, because they would do it to themselves. So as a client, you're
Hmm.
seeing them do
Hmm.
it to themselves. You're like, oh, you're not just calling me out on my judgments. Like, you have judgments as well, and like you have to check
100%.
as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
From what I've heard, this team consult is really kind of the bread and butter that keeps you from burnout. Uh, and
Yeah.
then, with your experience with community health, I'm sure you've come across extensive
Yeah.
burnout in those settings. I have a friend
Yeah.
who was a social worker, and she experienced that in some of her clinical settings,
Yeah.
and a buddy of mine who is about to graduate with his social degree, and he's very mindfully choosing a career path with his social work degree that isn't going to burn him out, just
Yeah.
because of all the stories that have come in during his program that you hear. It's kind of like, they're kind of like ghost stories. Like, you
Really
come through
is.
these programs, and it's like, oh, well, beware the fact that you'll be making $25 an hour under somebody who's making
Yeah.
75 for
Yeah.
10,000 hours, whatever it may
Mhm.
be. And yet, in these DBT practices, I don't see a lot of, I'm not hearing, at least, a lot of
Yeah.
that language. And that really, do you think,
Yeah.
has a lot to do
And
with the team console?
yeah, I love that you bring that up because in the community mental health field, there is a lot of burnout. I think one of the reasons why there is a high rate of burnout is because there's a lack of the DBT being implemented in that setting. But in terms of the team consult and like my own level of burnout, I don't feel that burnout. And I think it's because of a supportive, collaborative team consult. So essentially, when I explain what team consult is to the client, is that it's essentially like therapy for the therapist, where we're able to kind of check each other out, kind of consult with each other with different cases, and also use the skills that we preach. So that means being mindful of our own emotions, being mindful of our own judgments, whether that be ourselves or the client. So we're holding ourselves accountable and having the opportunity where a team member can not call us out, but call us in
Hmm.
and help us, direct us back, pivot us back if we're not adhering to treatment. Because at the end of the day, even though we may have a doctorate degree or a therapist or whatever mental health professionals, at the end of the day, we're human beings too. And so I think that an effective mental health clinician is one that is using the DBT skills and also using team consult in a way that is most effective. So being authentic, being vulnerable, talking about tough cases, and validating that, and also radically accepting that there are going to be moments where a session might not go the way you want it to, or whatnot. So I love team consult and I love my team members. They're the best.
Yes, I mean, that's what I keep hearing, and that seems to
Yeah.
be, yeah, just an amazing and important linchpin for success in the DBT setting. I do have a question about the fact that, again, going back to that, it being such kind of like a last minute, wait, what is this thing? You had so much experience in all the other modalities that you were talking about. Did you find that your life and the relationships that you have within your life changed after you took DBT more
Oh,
seriously versus the previous
100%.
modalities? Yeah?
Yeah, 100%. It sounds so cheesy, but like the as you know, like the metaphor in DBT is like creating a life worth living.
Yes.
And honestly, yeah, yeah. And then when I came across DBT, I was like, yeah, this is it. I use the skills out of my practice and outside of session. So Dear Man, like which is a skill in interpersonal effectiveness module, I've been throwing Dear Mans left and right, and that honestly has helped not only me building confidence in myself as a clinician, but as a human being, as a daughter, as a sister, and like learning to recognize that it is okay to ask for things and say no to things. So
Yeah.
my relationships have improved, my self-esteem has improved,
Mm,
my mindfulness and just like my concentration and my intention has improved because of the mindfulness module.
yeah.
And also being authentic. So learning to sit with my emotions I don't want, like anxiety or guilt or whatever. So the emotion reg modules have really helped me, just tap into my intense emotions and learn to love them with curiosity versus like, no, 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 we're not going to feel depressed today. No, 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 we're not going
Yeah.
to feel X, Y, and Z. So definitely, I feel like my quality of life has greatly improved for sure.
Same, same. And just
Yeah,
to, I don't know if I've shared this,
yeah,
but this is the community that I'm trying to build here is really a life worth living community, right? Like
I love that.
it's not necessarily like this isn't prescriptive. I'm bringing everybody on so that they can experience what I experience and then see these modalities for themselves, because the hope is that the people who need DBT will go and get it, and the people who need the psychodynamic will go and get it. People who need
Yeah,
CBT will go and get it. And I think that's the beauty of life, is that we get to choose which treatment is best for us. Because for me, it was really just, I didn't know the DBT existed in the capacity that it did.
yeah.
So once I got and for me, the door that opened to the gateway was getting a diagnosis of BPD, because it was
Yeah.
like, I'm a very solutions oriented person. So it was like, okay,
Mhm.
okay, well, here's the problem. What's the solution?
Yeah.
It's like, well, actually,
Yep.
the solution is this treatment called DBT. So it was like amazing. I was like, well, great, let's go do this thing. Little did I
Yeah.
know how much it was
Mhm.
going to just expand my experience just being alive.
I love that.
Because I would say one of the biggest gifts that DBT gave myself is the mindfulness practicum. So
Mhm.
how each module intertwines with
Mhm.
mindfulness
Yep.
was and is very huge for me. And I'm
Yeah.
already a big and guy. Like, I love
Yeah.
improv, I love stand-up comedy. I think the and is the most powerful word we can use sometimes.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so with BPD, I had no idea that I was experiencing mood swings. Right? Like I just thought my mood, I'd be so good, and then I'd be so bad, and I'd be so sad, and then I'd be so happy.
Yeah.
Whereas with the DBT skills and with the mindfulness skills that I can now put into place, it's a more noticing practice versus like sitting and like being overwhelmed with it. So
Yeah.
now it's getting to a place, finally, where it's like, I'm noticing my mood is taking me to a place. And I think what I love most about the practice of DBT and the mindfulness practice is like,
Mhm.
there's no like finish line. Like there's no ending. Like it's just, this
It's
is
a
life.
practice.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
life worth living. Like it's a
Yep.
day-to-day
Yep.
mindful experience. One of my favorite takeaways from also, I realize I've been saying her name. I've been calling her Marsha Linehan, and I'm pretty sure that's not her name. It's Marsha.
Oh, no, Marshall Linehan. Yeah,
Is it
that's right.
Linehan?
The founder of DBT or the creator of DBT.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, then
Yeah.
fine. It's Marsha Linehan. Um,
Yes. Right on. No, you got that right.
so I read her book, and it was amazing. It was just so incredibly enlightening and validating. And I gave actually that book to my parents to read because they had questions about BPD and about DBT and just like what my experience was. And I was like, well, I could tell you, or you could read this incredibly well written book that makes way more sense. And it
Uh-huh.
sparked a lot of really important, awesome conversations between me and my family. But the two things that come to mind are, I got through hell. I can promise myself that I can bring others through hell as well. I loved that part of her story because that's how I feel. Like once you get out to the other
Yeah.
side, not everybody
Mhm.
has the capacity to then turn around and be like, well, who else is still in there? Let's bring them along. And
Yeah.
and if you do have that capacity, which I feel I do, I love that now I have these skills and tools to turn around and be like, I have a ladder instead of like I have my voice. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like follow
Right.
the sound of my voice. Um,
Yeah. Which makes it practical, right?
Exactly. And
Uh-huh.
what kind of like blew my mind open a little bit was the analogy of a tulip in a rose garden. I had
Yep.
never heard
Yeah,
that
it's so good.
that idiom before, that metaphor before. And I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and I grew up in
Okay.
I grew up in an area that's globally known for its tulips. And so it
Oh,
just
ooh, fitting, very
right, so
fitting.
it felt very
Uh-huh.
synchronous. I was like, oh, well, I guess in a way, the reason I left town, even though I love my town, was that
Yeah.
I kind of felt like a rose in a tulip garden.
Yes, yes. And I
um,
think that like DBT does a really good job of like pointing that out. Like we might be very different from our environment and our setting, and there's a reason to it. And with the metaphor that you mentioned, there's like intention, like well intention behind those behaviors. It's just support fit in
yes,
terms of environment. Yeah.
and I think for so long my understanding of mental illness as an idea was that there were some that you just had to suffer with for the rest of your life, and the rest were just kind of like somewhere in between that spectrum of suffering. Whereas with DBT and with BPD especially, to learn that it is not only treatable, it's healable, is not once that is in the front of your mind, now you have an entirely different outlook on how life might look.
Yeah.
Because part of the despair for me was like, when the hell is this going to get fucking better? Like
Yeah.
when does this end for me? And
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for I'll call it the experience, I guess, of that mental journey. Because when somebody is like, oh, I can't believe that person would, want to kill themselves, it's like, well, you'd be surprised how much
Yeah.
the brain can suffer before it decides to pull the plug on life. Like it's
Yeah. Mhm.
nobody can convince you that life is not worth living more than you can convince yourself.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's not like a
Mhm.
fluty tooty, like you are your thoughts. It's just like a fact of the matter. Like if we are if
Yeah.
every day I don't know what's happening, I don't know why my mood
Yeah.
is shifting so abruptly, I don't know
Yeah.
why I'm having these angry outbursts, and people
Yeah.
are saying, oh, you might just have anger issues, it feels so much
Mhm.
deeper than that. As soon as somebody I attribute it to the analogy of when there's a big mess, from everybody running around in the dark, and somebody turns on the light, like there's plenty of blame to
Mhm.
go around.
Yeah.
DBT doesn't point out any blame. It's okay, we've got a mess to clean up together, instead
Mhm.
of look at the mess you made, which
Mhm.
again, huge, huge for me as somebody who
Yeah.
came from a very you know extreme of like shame and goodness, shame and
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's like a
yeah,
no blame model. That's what I like about DBT. Even with the biosocial theory, it's a no blame model.
yeah,
And I think one of the skills that DBT does a really great job in highlighting that other evidence-based treatment does not cover is the validation. And I don't know if we're going to talk about that later, but I think validation is so important. I think that we tend to invalidate not only ourselves, but we hear it from our environment, whether that be our family members, teachers, coaches, or whatever. And it's so subtle and it's so like insidious. Like
yeah,
you just hear these phrases and you're like, okay, well, I'm a loser, or like, okay, it is my fault that I guess that I didn't pass my test. And hi, that's invalidation. Hi,
yeah.
we gotta stop that. Hi, we gotta adjust that.
Yeah. No, we
You know
could
what I
talk
mean?
about invalidation right now. Like that, it is I read, let's see, so the books that I recommend to any person I ever come across, like if you're a human and you can breathe and read, these are the books I give to you, are Nonviolent Communication and then High Conflict Couples. You love that book?
I love that one. The nonviolent communication. I read that. Yep.
It's so my partner and I, we reread it. Like I've read it probably 3 or 4 times. She's read it a couple of times, like because it's too important in my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you
Mm-hmm.
grew up in a way where your environment was invalidating. And I'm starting to have these conversations with my parents because of course they have
Yeah.
questions. Like, well, what do you mean you grew up in an invalidating environment? It's like, well, you can love someone and invalidate their statements. Like these are two truths that are not mutually exclusive. And when
100%.
you learn that you've been invalidating other people and yourself, like there is an element of shame that comes into it where you're like, I wasn't hoping to make people feel that way. And then DBT kind of comes in and says, well, you didn't know. Like you don't know what you
Yeah,
don't know. So
exactly.
now you know the choice is yours. Has that been your experience with
Exactly.
validation as well?
Yeah. Can you say that again?
Has that been your experience with validation as well?
Yeah, 100%. I think that like again with invalidation, it's so subtle. Like there's different types of invalidation too. It's like verbal threats, it can be criticism, it can be belittling, it can be
Yeah.
comparison. And so those are different categories of invalidation. I think that again, it happens so quickly that it's hard to even like catch it, to even like
Yeah.
notice it. It's like catching a ghost. You know what I mean? It's like how can you do that when you don't even know what it is? And so with validation, I love that in DBT we teach the importance of that because when you start invalidating yourself or others, you're just gonna be it's gonna lead to misery. It's gonna lead to emotional pain. It's gonna lead to judgment. And when we're in that state, it's going to be really hard to achieve your values or your life worth living goals. And so it sounds like it's common sense, right? Like stop shooting yourself,
Yeah, yeah,
stop being mean to yourself. But or and a lot of individuals, they're their worst critics,
yeah.
right? And so how can we change that? How can we change or at least acknowledge the judgment? And how do we start? How do we start
Yes.
validating ourselves? Yeah.
Yes. I think it's so crucial too. I had a therapist at one point who pointed out the fact, I'm a writer, I'm an artist, I'm a performer,
So
whatever,
cool.
all the
Dude, you're a
things.
badass. You're so cool.
Oh, thank you, Cindy. Goodness gracious. I would consider you the badass given the things that you're doing, but here we go. And he
We're both
said,
badass.
I'll take that. Yeah, exactly. And we are both badasses.
Yeah.
He said, you need to, he basically was encouraging me to put my art out there, like embrace the judgments of other people. And it's again, this was another piece of advice that in isolation really didn't do as much good for me as it could have done in the context of what I later found in DBT. And yet I have the privilege now of having the DBT mindset to look back and be like, that's kind of what this person was pointing me towards, where it is once you start to accept that reality is full of invalidation and that you can radically accept that other people don't have the tools that you have,
Yeah.
you then
Yeah.
don't lead with what they're doing wrong. You lead with, well,
Right.
what can I do? And I've had a few experiences where the other person is incredibly dysregulated. They don't have the skills. They're not thinking about the way their verbal repertoire is violent in the way that they're communicating. And so you just have
Right.
to be really, really aware of like, okay, well, I'm not going to add to this invalidation and I'm not going to let what's happening out there invalidate and dysregulate.
So skillful.
Um, and again, it's like, there's no end date. Like it really is just like, I could do it well today and tomorrow I could like shit the bed. And then,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
then what I love about DBT, because for a while there I was a part of the 12 steps groups as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
What I love about DBT is it's all about getting back on the horse. It's just, it isn't about falling off the horse. And with the 12 steps, it's all about
No.
falling off the horse. It's all about stay on the path as long as you can, because falling off could mean the end of your existence.
It's so stiff. It's so
It's
stiff. It's very extreme
it's very
too.
extreme. And the thing
Yeah.
is, yeah, I don't not a lot of people know that the 12 steps programs globally have less than a 10% success rate. It's just that the people who are successful are really loud and have really powerful stories. And so, I get how that works. It's just most people don't benefit from such intense splitting. And like as
Mm-mm.
somebody who comes into those rooms not knowing that I was mentally ill, I was just splitting
Yeah.
splitting naturally. So it would be like,
Yeah.
you're right, I am a piece of shit. They're like, no, you're not a piece of shit. Like, we're all pieces of shit. I'm like, well, that doesn't make me feel better.
Yeah. No, yeah,
um,
I love that you bring that up. And I think that it's totally relatable to many people who are maybe even listening to the podcast. So definitely relatable to the individuals at DBTOC. Absolutely.
I love that. I love that. All right. Well, let me see. What other questions do I actually have for you? We could just keep chit chatting, but I have a few written down. Oh, here we go. All right. These are a little more BPD specific.
Okay.
Let's see. What was I going to say? Oh, so in your experience, I recently chatted with some of your amazing teammates, and they let me know that honestly, it's not always the best practice to lead with a diagnosis unless the client wants to. And I thought that was really mindful because it gives the impetus to the client to say, hey, this is a huge part of my identity and I want to lead with that. Or I'm not sure how I feel about this. And the therapist then goes, oh, we don't have to feel anything about it right now. We can get there later. For me, the identity is important because it set me up on such a clear path for success, and it acts as a reminder to me that like you're constantly healing from this thing you can't see yet you are experiencing. In
Mm,
your practice, how do you experience the BPD individual, whether that be in adolescence, teen, middle age, all the way to elderly adults?
yeah. Are you saying, I apologize. Are you asking like the benefits of knowing the diagnosis?
Oh, sorry. I'm
Sorry.
asking like, sorry, let me rephrase
No,
this.
no,
Most are like common modes of therapy really
no.
try
Yeah.
to steer clear of BPD patients because of the stigma around it, or they try to reignite or like redefine the definition. Like I have somebody in my life right now who's trying to change it to bipolar, and I'm like, I know the difference. And I understand that
Mm,
it can seem similar, and yet no, my lived experience does not match the bipolar diagnosis.
mm,
So in
yeah.
your clients and on your team, when you experience somebody who comes across with, we'll just say a more knowingly stigmatized diagnosis, how
Got it.
how do you experience them in the DBT setting versus maybe other modes of therapy?
Yeah, good idea or good question. So I think Unfortunately, within the mental health profession, there is judgment versus and also judgment towards certain diagnoses. And for me, I don't like to put labels, and I see the benefits of having like a common label so you can have an idea of where to proceed with treatment, right?
Hmm.
My experience with the with individuals who present with borderline personality disorder, they again, this may be very common across the board. They tend to have very strong, intense emotions and difficulty regulating their emotions and difficulties with relationships. And I think that within the DBT framework, each module can like tackle the problematic behavior. So, for example, if one is experiencing having fear of abandonment or having anger outbursts, the
Hmm.
DBT framework, or and also the skills, specifically the interpersonal effectiveness module,
Hmm.
helps the client navigate those tough conversations, like whether that be a dear man or give a give or a fast,
Yeah.
and in order to acknowledge the fear of abandonment, it really is a mindfulness component, and also the loving kindness practices and the self compassion practices, right? And so I think DBT does a really, really well job, a really great job of addressing the different presenting concerns or presenting problems or symptoms of those with borderline personality disorder. And high DBT is the gold standard for that treatment, so it makes sense, right?
Right. Yeah.
But it when you really look at the different modes of DBT, I think they meaning the creator of DBT really did a thoughtful job of creating and curating skills
Hmm.
to address various presenting problems in one's life. And so
Yeah.
I think it's very effective.
Yes, I think because the program was built from the inside out from somebody who was experiencing the system as it was,
Yes. Yes.
it gives a very unique and authentic feel to it, where someone like myself who can come in and smell someone who can smell a lack of authenticity right when they walk into
Mhm,
a room
mhm,
automatically feels safe. Like, oh shit, like these
mhm.
people actually
Yeah,
they understand, they get it.
it's
And
relatable.
it is
Mhm.
relatable. And what I'm discovering more and more, the more I read about BPD and the more I read about how it's diagnosed and how it presents, uh, it's still a little rigid within the psychiatric psychology world, and yet
Right.
DBT remains flexible. So it's like it really is a both and, because a lot of the people doing the diagnosing are very rigid, while the people who are doing the practice to help those people are not. Um, I'm wondering what you think could be a solution for people who are highly emotional. Let's say they don't have a discernible diagnosis, and yet maybe they don't know whether or not DBT would be good for them. Is there like a maybe a mental checklist that somebody could do, or like just a quick check in to be, you know what, this might be a good therapy for me because of
Yeah.
I'm meeting these
Yeah.
ideas?
Yeah, yeah. What a fantastic question. So things to ask yourself, if you're wondering if this is a right mode or modality for you, is really asking yourself, do I have intense and strong emotions? And if so, do I tend to have these strong emotions quite longer than my sister, my friend, or my
Yeah,
brother?
yeah,
Right? So the duration, right? And if that's a yes, then maybe ask yourself, how frequently do I have these strong emotions or these mood swings? So it's going to be the duration, the frequency, and also the severity too.
yeah,
Meaning like how intense do my emotions get, and how long does it take me to get back to that baseline?
yeah,
So let's say if I'm watching a movie like The Notebook, I identify myself as a sensitive person. I cried. I cried.
yeah,
I was watching it with my friends. No one shed a tear. Then I was more sensitive. I was more sensitive, and took me a longer time to get back to baseline, meaning where I could talk without having snot down my nose or
yeah,
salty tears down my face. But that's just kind of like a silly example or a demonstration of like that some people are not going to be as emotionally charged when you're watching a movie or
yeah,
interacting with people. So those would be signs or indications of DBT would be useful, but also like the impulsive behaviors or
yeah.
having urges to do things that might put one at harm. So that's going to be like the more of like the self-harm behaviors.
Yeah.
I don't know how explicit I can be on this podcast, but
Explicit as
essentially
you'd like. Yeah,
self-harm.
it's for
Okay.
grown-ups.
Yeah. Yeah, so self-harm that could be a plethora of different things. That means harming yourself physically by
Yeah.
cutting, or that could be hitting yourself, punching yourself, pulling out your hair, or engaging in more subtle self-harm behavior. So maybe that means risky, impulsive things. So like drinking and driving, or
Yeah.
drinking and then not having the ability to be in wise mind to consent to sexual encounters. So
Yeah.
I think those
Yeah.
would be examples of like impulsive behaviors or urges. And also I think if people notice that they're having maybe conflicts with their interpersonal life, whether that be with their friends or with their romantic partners or with their
Yeah.
family, I think DBT could be a really good fit because, as you know, there's a chunk of skills that address the interpersonal relationships.
Yes. Wow. An incredible answer. I'm not surprised. It was just an incredible
Oh, thank
answer.
you. I
Um,
appreciate it. Thank you.
it's just it continues to strike me as wild that it took me so long to get
Mhm.
to the DBT table. Only because because I keep a very somewhat detailed diary, and I've had since I was I have to answer this question before I should know this fourth grade, since fourth grade.
Okay. Okay.
Um, and when I was in the hospital, I did some fun time in the hospital. My partner brought me my journal, and I read through one of my journals from cover
Mhm.
to cover, and it was only for like a 2 or 3 year period, and I was like, oh my god, this poor person is just all over the place. Like we're
Yeah.
talking high, 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 low, 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 high. There was very
Uh,
no even keel. And for someone like myself, why I think it's so important for us to have these conversations is that it does hide in subtle ways, right? So,
it
no,
does.
my friendships were not interpersonally tumultuous because I'm great at
Mhm.
making friends and maintaining friends. But if you looked at my romantic partners and my romantic
Yep.
relationships, all of a sudden there's a completely different person experiencing
Yep.
a completely different set
Mhm.
of emotions and realities, right?
Yeah.
I don't feel any sort of fear of abandonment from, say, like my mom or my sister or my stepdad, because we have such a strong attachment. But
Mhm.
if a friend of mine all of a sudden decides that maybe they don't want to be friends anymore, I experience this just insane level of panic, and you don't know where it's coming from until you know where it's coming from. Uh,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
for men specifically, if we are socialized in our current cultural context, which I think we're in some ways getting away from this, and in other ways somehow going incredibly backwards, we internalize a lot of our external experience. We are processing it internally because we either one don't have friends to talk about it. We know that statistically men have a low number of friends, or we don't feel
Yeah.
safe with our partner or spouse, whether that be a same-sex couple or an LGBTQIA plus
Mhm.
couple. Uh,
Mhm.
and so therefore, we might be experiencing dysregulation. We might be wondering, what the hell is wrong with me? Why the fuck are my behaviors not like, why am I exploding over something that doesn't require this level of explosion? Right?
Yeah.
Oh, and the added caveat of having a therapist is really only half the ball game. Like you got to be honest with that therapist. And for
Yeah.
me, in the therapeutic setting, it's almost like a buddy buddy. Like you almost are like for someone like me who's worried about what the other person is thinking, or at that time was like, what are their judgments of me? Like, how do I fit what this
Mhm.
person needs in this moment? You become more interested in making sure that they find you interesting than in being honest. Because if you're honest, they might not find you as interesting. They might find you
Mhm.
broken.
Mhm.
And what I found with DBT is like it really, I don't know if this is an accurate, this is true from my experience. From my experience, what I found was that it wasn't necessarily about being 100% honest as it was about being 100% honest with how the skills are affecting you. I found that to be an incredible skill because by the time I got to the DBT Center of Orange County and by the time I got my therapist, I really wasn't interested in going deep or in having deep conversations about my
Yeah.
traumas that I've
Right.
experienced because I had been doing it for so long. What I was interested in was practical steps to live a life worth living. And so I got
Yes.
those, right? So it's like I think that there's this whole population of individuals who are living an internal experience of suffering because they don't know how to externalize it, not knowing that DBT is not going to require you to take all of that out on your own. Or
Yep.
we might not never ever talk about what it is that happened to you when you were 5, 6, or 7, because if you can get to a life worth living
Yep.
now in a certain way, yes, it happened, and it's not your reality right now. So
Mhm.
I think that's what I love a lot about DBT amongst
Yes.
many other
I
things.
love that you bring that up. Yeah, I love that you bring that up because I think I want to steal your answer because I want to use that answer when you ask me why I like DBT versus other modality because it is again very practical, but then you're not diving into the trauma work, right? Because we're not wanting our clients or the individual to necessarily go to a place where they need to process heavy, stressful, traumatic situations without if they don't have the skills yet to process that effectively. And so you're absolutely right. I think with DBT, it's so awesome because you're learning the skills and you can use it. You don't have to apply it from the past. You can use it in currently. Like if you're having a stressful situation or if you're having conflicts with your family or friends, like you can use the skills immediately, like right away versus like processing or trying to um uh dive deeper in the past. That's not what DBT is, at least
Yeah.
for stage one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah.
And I think like the language that DBT uses is helpful too, like a skills breakdown point. Like that
Mhm,
sounds much more inviting than you're mad and you don't know why, or like you're even like dysregulated. Like I think that's a helpful,
mhm,
it's helpful for somebody who's there and needs it. If you're not at a place where dysregulation is the language you're using, skills breakdown point is so almost elementary. Like you just feel like you're back in school, like shit. I I don't get to go to recess because I have a skills breakdown point, but I can like work backwards and figure out how I got here. Um, uh,
Yeah.
have you worked with kids a lot? I forgot to ask you that.
Yeah, so I my training was with kids, adolescents, individuals across the lifespan. So I've done a lot of quality work with kids and the dialectic. I love working with the adults
Yeah,
because I feel like with the adults who haven't had the opportunity to receive support when they're younger, like I want to be there for them. I want to provide that support
yeah.
and give them the skills if necessary or if needed. Yeah,
Yes, I
yeah.
one a project that I have in my mind in the ether that I'd love to bring down to
Uh,
the universe is
okay.
for parents and schools to be able to implement these skills for their kids. Because if we can't, if it's well, from what I
Yes.
understand, fairly unethical to diagnose certain things before certain ages, it would still be
Mhm,
within the wheelhouse to
mhm,
implement
mhm,
these skills. If not for the kids, then
mhm,
for the parents, right? Like I was
mhm,
first learning about BPD. One of the things that freaked me out was that sometimes there could be no discernible external reason, like good parents, quote unquote, good home.
mhm,
And yet these behaviors are still disrupting their life in such a severe way.
mhm, mhm.
Those parents might really benefit from DBT skills,
100%.
even if their kid is not
100%.
in a place to do such things.
Yeah.
So
100%.
I see some elementary schools leaning more towards mindfulness, which is really cool. Like I used to work in
Yeah.
a school in Los Alamitos, and
Yes.
there was a
Uh-huh.
fourth grade teacher, and she was implementing mindfulness, and that was really awesome. And of course, some of the kids were like, "Ah, this is boring," but she did a really
Yeah.
good job of making it interesting, and like there were prizes, and so it was like a
Yeah.
very rewarding
Yeah.
experience. But
Uh-huh.
it's not it's not common, it's not the norm, I think.
Mhm. Mhm.
And as someone who can see that like there is a clear solution,
Mhm.
gets frustrated when it's not
Oh,
implemented more
yeah.
frequently.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I'm there with you. Like, so when you asked me, like, with my work with the kids, so me and my like colleague at the time, which is like another prac student, we would teach the young little kiddos like social skills, so how to navigate getting bullied or identifying their emotions. Like, I
Yeah,
am sad, or there's more words to describe how you're feeling than it feels weird, right?
yeah,
So increasing their emotion vocabulary, I think, would also be very useful. But in terms of the parenting or having the parents learn the skills, I'm there with you. I think that it's very useful and be really more and powerful and also impactful if the kid and the parents have the same language and they have that same skills so they can use it together perhaps or also just have the parents modeling these skills or even having the kiddo model the skills so it's a full impact because you can't really change an environment with one person if
yeah.
there's more than one person in the environment.
100%. I'm so glad you said that because I think one of the hardest things for
Yeah.
some people to realize is that their environment needs to change. And
Yeah.
that can be really
Yeah.
scary if you're so used to the way things have been.
Yeah.
Like it's just like the unfortunate and painful statistics of people who come out of prison and go right back to the neighborhoods that were the cause for their behavior. And maybe
Mhm.
I was reading a book about
Yeah.
domestic violence programs in prisons in San Francisco, and they
Mhm.
were talking about how this program is amazing. Like people, there's like a 200-person waiting list to get in it, and yet some guys, even who finish it, go back and then reoffend because they break their parole or they break their restraining order because they're in the exact same environment. And one thing I
Mhm.
think that DBT does a pretty substantially good job about is making it known, you can only grow as much as the people around you are willing to.
Exactly.
Um, and,
Exactly.
and that's what I think, and I know for a very strong fact that my partner and I are still together because it was a very tough realization to be like, it can't be a one person thing. Like we
Mhm.
both have to grow and evolve in a
Mhm.
way that changes. And it's been 100% for the better, right? Like, how can you
Mhm.
not be a better couple validating each other more, right?
You can honestly just get wins out of that. You know what I mean? You just feel better if both parties are validating it. And I think I definitely agree with you in terms of the environment. I think a lot of the environmental factors, of which again that could be parents, coaches, or whoever that might be, they may be not supportive or they may be invalidating. And again, because they don't know how to validate, they don't have those
Yeah,
skill sets. Yeah. And so whenever I tell my clients all the time that you might be the smartest, most skillful person at home. You might be the most skillful person at school or at work. So
yeah,
it's kind of having that awareness. It's like, yeah, like your parents or your work surroundings may not have be as DBT oriented or skillful as you,
yeah,
but you do. Right. And
yeah,
so reminding yourself that you can change your environment. And if you do, and if you can encourage your family members learn the DBT, that's fantastic. That's wonderful. That's what I would recommend. And at times, some may not be as fortunate, right?
right,
To change their environment or have their family members do a DBT program or learn the skills. And if
yeah,
that's the case, then what skills can you use to
right,
kind of acknowledge that, which I think would be everyone's favorite
yeah,
radical acceptance at
yeah.
that point.
It's
Yeah.
very, I mean, radical acceptance is somehow incredibly simple and so difficult to implement. Not because it is like a super
Yes.
high-minded practice, but
Yes.
because it is your brain doesn't wanna. Like, why accept something so terrible? And it's
No.
like, well, hang
No.
on. As soon as you accept it, it goes away, which is like a
It
weird
feels
little, yeah,
better.
it feels
Yeah.
better. There was
Uh-huh.
a there was a study done, I can't remember from which university, that
Okay.
studied acceptance, and the idea was tolerance of suffering. So they would put people in a room and said, "Hey, you're going to be together for 3 hours," and they made sure that people were people that wouldn't get along, and they were like, they were upset the whole time. And then as soon
Okay.
as they said, "Hey, you're here for a week or longer," then all of a sudden their behavior started to change because they had to radically accept that this person wasn't going anywhere. They were stuck with them for this amount of time. And like, while that's a silly example of putting up with people who are difficult to be around, it's a good example of how radical acceptance affects things in your day to day. For example, driving to work, traffic. God, I just loathe the existence of traffic. I don't know why it
Me
still
too.
exists. Makes zero
Me
sense
too.
to me.
Yeah.
And so when you get in the car and your first thought is fuck traffic, you're a little bit behind as you get in the car. If you get in the
Yeah.
car and your thought is traffic,
Mhm.
like it, it's so simple and so frustratingly difficult to because I want to say it's not difficult to do, it's difficult to repeat. Because like I said earlier, like maybe one day you're like so mindful the whole drive home and you're like, ah, wow, I'm a master. Here we go. And then the
Mhm.
next day
Mhm.
you get cut off once and you're just like sending ill will, like just over like fuck
Yes, the
loving
willfulness shows
kindness.
up.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, willfulness. That was another very important concept for me to take in
Mhm.
because I am a very willful person. And in some ways,
Oh, me too.
and there's positive willfulness, right? Like there are ways to
Mhm.
be willful, right? Justice, taking
Yeah.
care of yourself,
Yeah.
loving people. Like there are positive ways to be willful. It's when, as you know, when we could become dysregulated, when we get our skills breakdown point, or when we're in an environment where this is not helpful, that all of a sudden it becomes a little more difficult to implement these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
100%. Mhm.
well, and then I have a follow-up question for you. So
Okay.
this is existing on social media. I'm building out a life worth living community on social media, hoping that everybody will come and participate. Uh, how have you felt? I've asked everybody this question. How have you felt about the sudden influx of kind of pop psychology, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, giving people advice while not giving them maybe the complete answer?
So this is a really good question. For me, I tend to lean into the optimism side. I think that there is space for all to share. I appreciate that we're in a time in our life where people want to talk about mental health, whether they are mental health professionals or whether they're not.
Yeah.
I think it increases mental health awareness. It normalizes that depression is real,
Yeah.
anxiety is real,
Yeah.
borderline is real,
Yeah.
trauma is real. So I think there's a lot of benefits to it. I think it gets a little bit problematic when people or the person who's talking about mental health is not putting accurate information out there. So I think as a consumer, like one thing that I would recommend is like listen to what you want to listen to. And I would encourage you guys to practice discernment. I would encourage you guys to practice judgment, but judgment in a way where you're evaluating, not judgment of like the,
Yeah.
having opinions and assumption. So I think with that, it's like you listen to what you want to listen to. And if you question someone's point of view, or if you have a question about the recommendation, that's what Google's for. Start researching, and start being a little scientist. I think
Yeah.
that one can only benefit from that. But I think also being mindful that whatever is out there is not always going to be useful or applicable or accurate. So definitely follow up if you're willing to do that.
Yeah.
And again, the silver lining of that is that there's discussion about mental health. And so I would prefer that versus minimizing that
Yeah.
and suppressing that and denying that. So that's my opinion.
I love it. Everybody's given a very dialectical answer so far, so
Okay.
I've definitely enjoyed
Okay.
it. I
Yeah.
feel I feel similarly. I think my frustration comes more in the practice of the advice that people give. Like I gave the joking example earlier of my boyfriend is a narcissist because I saw it on
Mhm,
TikTok, and
mhm,
it's hard when you think that somebody's meeting these behavioral markers. It's like, well, he is doing this and he is doing this, and it's like it's so tough. He might be
mhm,
doing those things and just be emotionally immature or mentally
mhm.
incapable of having these conversations, whatever it may be,
Exactly.
and it's um it's tough because I don't know if you're familiar with the term the manosphere, but the manosphere, are you familiar with this term?
I've heard that. No,
I
no.
recently shared with a buddy of mine. He was like, "Oh, that's gross," and I was like, "Well, it's a legitimate term." But the manosphere is this sub community that some believe is very niche. I find it to not be niche, of misogynists online. So men who go
Mhm,
their own way, incels. You've heard of groups like the Proud Boys, and yeah, I'm not going to give them any more
mhm.
breath. Anyway, those groups. Um,
Okay.
they're difficult to reach because they are not thinking dialectically, and anything that comes to
Mhm,
the door that sounds like an affront on their idea of masculinity is immediately
mhm,
shunned. So the challenge for someone like myself is to just always have the door unlocked, right? Like I
mhm.
think about people who need help in regards to cultic minds. I know a lot about cults. uh, I find them to be both terrifying and incredibly fascinating. And
Right.
one thing that I tell a lot of people, if they think that they're running into somebody who might be in a cult or in an MLM or whatever it may be, is don't run to them and say that they're in a cult. Don't run to them and say that they're in an MLM and that their life sucks and they're being taken advantage of. If you have to do anything, be available, be somebody who, if they do decide to get out, that they could be like, oh my gosh, like I've cut off all of these people. Oh wait, except for this one person who said that if I ever wanted to get out, like they'd be a safe space. So like the idea is to have a foam pit, not a trampoline. So like
Right.
when these people are done doing their high wire work of all of the judgments and everything that they've had to hold on to, and they reach their breakdown point, instead of like having a trampoline that they fall on, they're like, get out of here, come back when you're fully
Yeah.
ready. Having a foam pit for them to land into where you're just like, hey, glad you're here. Glad you made it.
Ah, yes. No, I think that was beautifully said, and I think that you're absolutely right in terms of just like yeah, I think my last add-on I would echo myself. I'd be a broken record. Just be mindful of the information's out there, and not everyone is narcissistic, right? When
Right.
you watch a reality TV show, not everyone's narcissistic.
Right.
So just kind of be mindful of that. And even I noticed even the word trigger or like trauma is being
Oh
thrown
yeah.
out quite often. And so
Yeah.
I would also be mindful of that. It's like all emotions are triggered or cued by something, by a prompting event, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you have trauma, right?
Yeah.
So it's like PTSD like the symptoms would be like, okay, like you're having dissociation, there's flashbacks, there's
Yeah.
nightmares, there's avoidance, right? And
Yeah.
so again, just being mindful of the words that we're using, because sometimes we may say, oh, I feel so traumatized that I didn't get my coffee in time, and so now I'm late, right? And so just being aware of that, and that there is meaning behind words.
Yes, and
Yeah,
I think it would be lovely if more people would stop positioning themselves as an expert and more of like as a curious seeker of information.
100%,
Because
100%, I
like
love
for
that.
example, like I'm
Yeah.
making all this content where it's all about DBT, it's all about mental health, but I don't have a
Yeah.
degree in mental health. I don't have, years of experience working in
No.
public health. So if I'm coming to you and saying, "Hey, I'm the expert on this," that
Yeah.
means nothing. Like it means I'm the expert on my experience. And so I think that if you're somebody on social media, and this is just my personal worldview at this moment, is unless you are literally an expert,
Uh,
yeah, don't lead with that. Don't present the information you're giving as
yeah.
expert advice. I was just hanging out with a buddy of mine recently who said that he can't stand when he can tell information is regurgitated but is being shared as expert advice. And
Mhm.
I take pride in the fact of saying this is this thing and it came from this book, not from
Yes,
me.
yes, putting a disclaimer, you know what I mean? Like, and I agree with you. If you're not an expert, maybe practice the radical acceptance piece.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And the dialectic of that, it's okay. You don't have to be an expert to be an expert in your life or wanting to share your experience. You don't need to have a doctorate degree in that. And yeah, be mindful of what words and how you're presenting yourself, because people are listening to podcasts and they're trying to learn. And so just being mindful of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And like anybody who's listening to this, I hope at this point is aware of the fact that this is an ongoing journey. There really isn't a
Yes.
destination. Like there isn't,
Yeah.
oh, well, when you do this, this is what happens, or here are the 10
Yeah.
steps to success and yada, yada, yada. It's
Mm,
sure if you want to use biohacks and if you want to optimize, your daily living, go for it. I say that will look so much better if you add some mindfulness to it. If you add some of these
mhm,
other skills into it. I'm not saying what you're doing is morally bad or weird or any of these other judgments. I just think that if you want to live a life worth living, you do it. You got to do it. In my opinion, a life worth living is a mindful moment to moment life.
Same.
Um,
Same.
I love that. Okay, I've got a few silly questions for you, and then one hard hitting question, and
Okay.
then
Let's do it.
we'll wrap this thing up. The first a
Okay.
few are just about what you read and what you watch. So you can either give me a DBT answer or a whatever Cindy watches answer. So favorite book, um, if you don't read, favorite TV show, and if you don't want TV, if
Okay.
you don't watch TV, favorite movie,
Okay.
either related to
Okay.
DBT or not. Sarah
Okay.
Sarah gave me her guilty pleasures, so you can say whatever you want.
I'm going to be on that train most likely.
Awesome, awesome, awesome.
Okay. So my favorite book, right? Or
Yes,
favorite
yes,
movie.
yeah, yeah.
So
Favorite book.
I thought you were gonna, I thought you were gonna ask you right now. Okay, sorry, I
I wasn't
understand now.
sure if one of us was freezing, so I was like, "All right, we're just going to practice patience."
Yeah, we can practice some mindfulness and
Yes.
non-judgment. Okay, so favorite book, what's so interesting, I can tie everything into DBT. So my favorite book is actually one of the ones that you mentioned, the nonviolent communication. I think another book that would be really useful and one that really changed my life is something called Not Nice by Dr. Aziz. So if
Ooh,
it's a really interesting book, it really talks about what nice is, the outcomes of being nice, and the hardships of being a nice person. Because I used
yeah,
to have the nice girl syndrome, saying yes to everything, people pleasing. And so,
yeah.
if you're interested in learning how to be a little bit more assertive and then also learn about the impacts of being nice and keeping the peace, definitely recommend that book.
I love that. Okay, that's
Yeah.
good. That's a good recommendation. Strong
Okay.
start. How about TV or
Yeah.
movies?
Okay, TV or movies. Okay, so I typically don't watch a lot of TV, but when I do, again, I can tie it into DBT with the distract skill. So I love like Pixar movies, like The Incredibles, or I like Shrek. I know Shrek is not part of the Pixar, but things that are like kind of nostalgic, like
Yeah.
that's a little childish and fun. Like those are my go-tos. And I also love like stand-up comedy. Yeah,
Yes. I just got back
yeah.
up on the stage and I'm doing stand-up comedy again.
Did you really? Oh my gosh,
Having a good time.
I have to come watch
Yeah,
one day.
it's a recent journey. Before the pandemic, I took a class at Second City in LA and had so much fun. And then
Uh,
I just because I didn't know what I was dealing with. My life slowly
Uh-huh.
unraveled.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
now that we've gotten back, this is what Nicole and I have talked about a lot, is like, well, now that
Uh,
we're at like a place of balance, the world is so much more available. There are things that we can do without it being terrifying. Like I recently did an audition at a stand-up at this little bar, and I realized I really didn't care what I couldn't even hear anybody if they were laughing or if they was talking. It was loud. I was just having a blast by myself because it was for
uh-huh.
me. Whereas prior to DBT, prior to the skills, prior to putting mindfulness first, oh my gosh. I mean, sweating bullets. I used to get so nauseous before going on stage, even though I did it all the time. It would be like you either have to poop your
Yeah.
pants or puke.
Mhm.
One of those two
I
things.
mean, that's understandable. Like you're putting yourself out there on the stage, so I totally get it.
Also,
Yeah.
The Incredibles is a movie that I will like just drop into randomly. Well, like
Mhm.
somebody will say one thing, and I'll just be like,
Yeah.
oh, like here's a
Yep.
full uh,
Yep.
great movie. I used to watch it during my finals weeks in college every year, just like have it on in the background,
It's
which is
the best. I love The Incredibles too. And also The Incredibles too. Yeah.
yes, 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 yes.
If I had to do TV, I've been on like a reality TV wagon. So like
Ooh,
Vanderpump Rules,
okay,
the Real Housewives of whatever city it is. So I can practice being non-judgmental or judgmental, but it's just also a good distract activity too.
yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
my partner, she is like has such an extensive knowledge of reality TV. Like she is keeping up with the Kardashians and has. And like I
Ooh.
used to have so many judgments about those shows and the people who
Uh-huh.
watch them, and she has slowly dismantled my judgments to the point now where like
Yeah.
someone in like a friend setting will be like, say something disparaging about the Kardashians, and I'm like, excuse me, first of
Yeah.
all, are you aware of the social impact that they're having right now?
Yes, I love that. You're like their spokesperson, their protector. I like it.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't think anybody gives a better interview than Kim Kardashian.
Mhm.
She is like a
Mhm.
rock solid individual. People
Mhm.
are always trying to like poke her and like get her
Mhm.
to say something disparaging about other people, and she is just nope, like
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever. It is what it is.
Yes. Yes.
I'm not gonna address that question, and then you just move on because she
Good
has
for
such a
her having those boundaries. Good for her.
love it. Okay, last
Yeah.
question. Take your time. It is
Okay.
kind of a long one. What
Okay.
is a truth you wish
Yeah.
people suffering from suicidal ideation,
Yeah.
uncontrollable mood swings, depression, self harm could internalize and believe immediately with the wave of a magic wand?
Yeah. I think I wish that I would say this. I would say to this person, I wish you could see how resilient you are, and that you are worthy of love, of belonging, and there's a space for you to heal and to grow. You may not feel it right now, you may not believe it right now, and give it some time, and you are worth it. And I honestly wish that you could see the resilient person that I see in front of me. Yeah.
Just fantastic. Just a great answer,
Oh my
truly.
God.
Oh my gosh. Cindy, thank you
Oh
so
my
much
gosh,
for
you're so
taking the
funny.
time to talk to me today. Thank you for giving the
Yeah.
time to the listeners and the people who are watching this on YouTube. It's so important for people to know that there is safe places for them and that there is non-judgmental spaces that they can come into.
Yes.
And there is
Yes.
no prerequisites. There are no things that you have
Mm,
to have or do before you come into these spaces. I mean, you do have to have insurance usually, and you do have to have a will to fight insurance agencies. However, different
mhm.
conversation for a different time.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll
The
bring
next podcast.
the next
Next
podcast. I'll
podcast.
just bring insurance brokers on, and we'll just be like, "What the heck?"
I would definitely listen because I need knowledge on that. So
Well, good to
very
know.
informative.
Lock it away.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Cindy. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next
Thank
time.